All right, revenge lovers, ready for some karma in action? This is the best of r/ProRevenge, where clever comebacks meet poetic justice. Prepare for jaw-dropping tales of cunning plots and icy paybacks. Forget simple revenge. This is ProRevenge. Alrighty, let's dive in. Story 1. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race. The list of personal slights was so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon, after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled the list of Jane's derogatory comments and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he did not have authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left, loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying to 5, 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him "Congrats, let me know if you need any insights on the new place." We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs, where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new Big Shot in a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I'm an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour-long call with Big Shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general. But the evidence he needed was right in front of him. He thanked me for my honesty and told me to ignore Jane from now on. The next day, Jane was called into Big Shot's office and fired on the spot. I walked by her desk as she was packing up her things and smiled. She glared at me and said, "You'll never be happy." I just laughed and said, "I'm already happier than I ever was with you." Story 2. I was 6 years old when I called my family crying, telling them that I knew something was wrong and that my mother didn't love me. My mother punished me for ruining her image by spinning a story to my family that I was a pathological liar who had been brainwashed by my grandmother to ruin her life. She effectively cut me off from my family and the outside world, making sure I had no internet or cell phone access until I moved out. She also prevented me from getting a job and tried to sabotage my efforts to get into college. I went through hell in that house. When I was younger, I retaliated in immature ways. But as I got older, I was very careful with how I talked to her. I only ever told her the truth. But because she had convinced herself that I was a pathological liar, she would think that anything I said was only intended to hurt her. If I said, "You should bring an umbrella today. It looks like rain," she would make a point of not bringing one to spite me, and then she would get caught in the rain. If a friend said something similar to what I said and was genuinely trying to help her, my mother would think that person was her enemy and remove them from her life. She only had nasty people in her life since she'd removed herself from everyone who cared. She called me looking for advice. LOL, right? She was basically going to fly across the country to go stalk someone, and I told her not to do that. He'll dislike her even more, and he could call the police. I got in touch with her dad and told him to try to stop her. She went because now she was convinced it would work. The poor guy was hiding in his workplace while she was outside crying for him to come outside. You can't say I didn't warn her. I hear she's in therapy now, but it doesn't seem to be working much. I can imagine why. It must be a very upsetting experience to have a professional tell you the same lies your pathological liar of a daughter told you. So basically, my revenge is just the fact that I'm now a solid believer in killing someone with kindness. Story 3. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy had money, but he would cheat and lie anything to get out of paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become part of their broadcast package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system so that we could start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day that we failed to do this past the deadline meant that the owner would suffer a penalty per the contract. Not knowing about how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000 he could get a system that would automate the entire process, which of course this guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend with finding a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what a piece of work this guy was, I warned my friend not to front the money because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work, we went live on schedule, and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with the bill. Immediately, the usual excuses started. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" Then my friend pulled out the kicker. Not only did my friend threaten to take all the equipment back and take the station off the air, he revealed that in order to get the uplink working for cheap, someone had to come in every day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes less than 5 minutes, but of course no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed, plus a $2,000 per month consulting fee, or the station goes dark and he starts paying the penalty to DirecTV. The owner paid fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 per month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story: only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run. Story 4. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard the news on how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer housing. Edit. Found out it's not a private letter. He did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. For example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers and 2 are for officers, since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military is that crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes in his letter. And yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted as an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There are also sexual assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife, and 2 daughters who are 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being so commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives in enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are drug users, perverts, criminals, etc. Here's the kicker. He was an enlisted Army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent alcoholics, pervs, drug users, etc. Based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life. Deny days off, make you stay late, write you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was pissed, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I got out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire, but I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of them as trading cards, but they are custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger on the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud we deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So now the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went during work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, they can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time the military cares is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to Captain's Mast, which is like a Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his criminal offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through paid for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one wanted to work with him. Story 5. This story starts over 5 years ago, with me struggling in a position that I was not qualified for. I am an electrical engineer, but my degree is in computer engineering. The difference is subtle, but enough that most recruiters for major companies see computer in my name and assume the next word is science. Seeing as some of my schooling did include programming, well, to escape significant pay cuts, I accepted a position as a software engineer. That did not go well, but it was a great company, and when I handed in my notice, my old manager said, "If you ever need a job, let us know." The company I was moving to was a giant in their field, with divisions all around the country in every conceivable aspect of that particular genre of engineering. But the main reason for my accepting the position was that I was offered a job as an electrical engineer. Finally, I'd be working in my field. For the most part, things started out pretty well. My first performance review was stellar, as I was put in charge of a small team of hardware engineers to finish a product. Really, I was a go-between for the engineers and program office, since the PMO guys never really liked dealing with the boots on the ground, so to speak. One particular engineer was the subject matter expert, SME, and was damn smart, but clashed with management. Since I was able to adequately quell his frustrations while keeping the program running, I got a nice pat on the back, a small bonus, and a decent raise that first year. The only problem? My manager seemed surprised about it. Huh, someone must have really liked the work you did. Well, no duh, but okay. As the months dragged on, I was put on program after program, usually because something went wrong and they needed it fixed. Not a problem. It's what I was good at. This batch of widgets wasn't tested correctly? All right, let me find the site process and rerun the week-long test and get that report out to you. The test fixture for another widget is having problems. Let me take a look at it. There's your problem, and here's how to fix it. What I didn't know, going into this job, was that my manager was one of the boys that our division director promoted. The director was the old manager, and once he ascended to his throne, he brought up my manager to his position. My manager and director were in sync, to the point that when an employee went to the director to complain about the manager, Mr. Director invited the manager to the meeting and told the employee, if you have a problem with him, you need to talk to him about it. That employee went 8 years before his next promotion. Not only that, but he had a master's degree, but was working as a new college hire. For 8 years. Other employees left after promises of promotions went unfulfilled, yet others left because it was all work and no play. The environment there was really toxic, at least in my group. I'm put on another program and actually given an impossible task. No, it was actually impossible. When you're told to do the impossible, though, they don't want to hear, it literally cannot be done. They wanted to hear, yes, sir. Unfortunately, even with doing research on my own, it took me all of one day to come to the conclusion that, yes, one cannot fit a 12-inch peg into a 2-inch hole. You can't make the hole bigger or the peg smaller, was essentially the response I got. You can't alter the peg at all. That's what the chief engineer wants. It's what he gets. 2 months of screwing around trying to stretch the hole without stretching it, or squish the peg without squishing it, and the project was taken away from me and given to someone who knows what the hell they're doing. Fun fact, the engineer they gave it to needed 2 months and ended up doing it the way I had originally suggested. Go me. God forbid I get any recognition for that, though. I forget about all of that and am given a new assignment that's pretty much just cleaning up after another engineer and making sure a bunch of test equipment is pushed through and sent to our manufacturing plant. This too was not as easy as described, and yet my manager was hounding me. Documents were rejected for reasons beyond my control. Parts weren't available from the manufacturer, causing delays. The software team was behind on getting me updates to firmware. All the while, my boss continues to say, just finish this and then the fun jobs start. The issues piled up and I started looking for the door. I actually had a few interviews with companies in the area, but I'd either never get a call back or I'd hear that the requirements for the position have changed. At my mid-year review, my manager actually plays it off pretty cool. Oh, these delays aren't your fault. You can't get software to go any faster, and we've always known this particular manufacturer has issues keeping stock, etc. Great. Maybe someone from up high got on my manager about his crappy attitude toward his employees. It turns out, no, that didn't happen at all. I'm just going to skip to the chase here. My manager shafted my entire group from bonuses and recognition for a major product launch. We sat there as both software and marketing teams were recognized, while my manager said, yeah, they deserve the recognition. They were here on nights and weekends fixing all of the issues. When I told my manager that we knew, since we were also at work those same nights and weekends, the response I got was mind-boggling. Well, they didn't cause those problems that you were fixing. He was, of course, implying we caused our own problems. So at this point, I was done, but thankfully had an interview lined up in the following weeks, and I ended up getting an offer shortly afterward. Knowing we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year, and our yearly performance bonus has a full commitment requirement, I called corporate HR to ask when the last day I would be eligible for would be. They said 2 weeks after my scheduled start date. I call my new employer and ask to push the date back. No problem. I then gleefully type up and print out my resignation letter, sign it, and then hand it to my manager. I should also note that when I started, we had 10 engineers in my group. At this point, we now only had 6, and were struggling to find replacements for everyone who had left. When my coworkers mentioned that I could just email him, I shrugged and said I wanted to see what his reaction would be, face to face. Again, I would be disappointed and yet somewhat amused. His response was nodding a bit and smiling. Got it. So what will you be doing? I believe I hid my shock well, considering he's now down 5 engineers in a single year. But I told him where I'm going and what I'll be working on, and he just says, cool. Now, I mentioned that I gave a full 4 weeks notice. During those weeks, I spent a lot of time wrapping up projects and writing detailed reports on what I had done and how I went about doing it. My last day comes and goes without much ado. Fast forward to September of that year. I've been keeping in touch with my old coworkers, and it comes to mind that I never got my bonus. While after taxes it wasn't much, but it's still money and I made sure I would qualify for it. I called corporate HR and was told, unfortunately, I needed to stay through until the end of the fiscal year, 2 weeks after I had left. I could, however, reach out to my old manager and he could potentially get me a prorated bonus since I was given incorrect information. So I email my old manager with that information and the response I get is a little unexpected, though I probably should have seen it coming. Yeah, I knew you wouldn't be eligible for the bonus if you left before the end of the fiscal year, which is why I was confused that you were leaving then. I can't help you. Screw you, dude. He admitted to knowing I wouldn't get my bonus and also that he never discussed it with me. Welp, it was at this point that I knew I had to get revenge, but in order to do that, I needed to bide my time. My new company had lots of openings all around the country, but most required at least 3 years' experience. In my old group, 2 guys were thoroughly entrenched with my manager, so I didn't care about them, but the 3 others I knew I had to get out of there. One of them was someone I considered a mentee, since that was his first job out of college. He was only a year and a half into his career, so I knew I had to wait for his time on to catch up. The other 2 were at 10 and 15 years in, so I started looking for them. I'd check in every few months to see how everyone was doing. The young guy was miserable. The older guys were too. No one could get anything done, and my old manager started yelling at employees in their cubicles or blaming them for issues during a meeting where the employee wasn't present. Finally, the young guy hits that 3-year milestone, but he knows he doesn't have the skills to really go anywhere. I don't care. I get him in our system and start spamming him with job listings in the city he was already looking to move to. 3 interviews later, and he's happily working for my company and has a new girlfriend to boot. Every now and then, I'd reach out to the other 2 guys to see if they're interested in changing jobs. The answer is usually, yes, but insert random excuse. After about a year of hearing that, I kind of give up, but keep them in the back of my mind. About 6 months later, I get a text from Guy 1 saying, "That's it, I'm done. Can you get me out of here? Oh, and Guy 2 wants out too. Here's his number." Jackpot. Unfortunately, Guy 2 didn't meet some very strict requirements for positions at my company, but I start getting him in contact with other people I know in the industry. I meet up with Guy 1, go over his resume, look through my company's listings, and get him into our HR system, which should flag any positions where he may be a good fit. While he does get some callbacks, and while my company is aggressively hiring, he actually lands an interview at one of our competitors and eventually gets a job offer. Awesome. Thankfully, Guy 2 is also able to escape, finding himself in a great position that's closer to his family. Both jobs also came with significant pay bumps, because God forbid my old manager actually fight to pay his employees what they're worth too. My old manager is still there somehow, but Guy 1 told me that when he turned in his 2 weeks, the manager really started panicking and tried his best to keep Guy 1 on board, even though he had been yelled at for things the week prior, and the week prior to that, and the week prior to that. Story 6. All names and locations are changed. About 10 years ago, on Neptune, I was working in my first software development job out of university. We made websites, promotional material, and supplied equipment for conferences and trade shows. So if a company wanted a booth at some event, we would produce everything and support them for the duration of the event. This is where I came across Maleficent. She was in charge of the marketing department of a company on nearby Pluto, and they hired us for a convention they were attending. I produced the website for them, which consisted of some pictures and videos of their latest product with a few paragraphs of text. Also some links to their social media, a sign-up form, etc. Pretty basic stuff. It's important to note here that I never met Maleficent in person during this time, just talked to her once on the phone, the rest via email. She mainly dealt with our project manager, a lovely woman called Credenza, who made sure all the different parts worked together. Part 1. The screw-up. Everything was going fine. I'd produced their website and was just waiting for Maleficent to send some images and videos of their product to replace the placeholders I had been using in the meantime. This was a Tuesday. The event was the following Monday. I emailed Maleficent asking when I could expect the files and got no reply. Still no reply Wednesday, so Thursday I asked Credenza to chase it up. She stopped by my desk a short while after, a bit flustered. She'd just spoken to Maleficent, who had angrily claimed that she had sent them the previous week and had emailed me. She blamed Credenza and me for being incompetent. I could find it nowhere in my inbox or junk folder, so as far as I was concerned, she was lying or had sent it to the wrong email. Credenza contacted her again, confirmed my email address, and asked her to send them again. She shouted at Credenza some more, but eventually sent the files, but not until the last moment on Friday afternoon as I was getting ready to leave for the weekend. What a witch. I had to run that evening, but I promised Credenza I would log on Saturday morning and copy the files to the website and everything would be ready for Monday. Saturday morning and the video files didn't work. I don't remember the details exactly, but the files were made using some kind of proprietary codec that I just couldn't convert to something usable on their website. Long story, marginally less long, I spent Saturday praying to gods I didn't believe in for a miracle that wouldn't happen while trying to get in contact with Maleficent. Eventually on Sunday, she replied back, and I slowly walked her through the process of using another video format. She was using some crappy pirated software I'd never heard of to produce the videos. When she finally sent it, it still was wrong, but at least it was in a format I could read and convert myself. It all worked out in the end. The website was ready by Sunday evening and the convention went well. Part 2. Trying to get me fired. Following the convention, Maleficent was furious. She again accused us of incompetence and me personally for messing up her weekend. What about my weekend? I fired back at what a pain in the butt Maleficent had been. The guys who met her at the event said she was no easier in person, and how I'd done everything I could, but Maleficent denied everything and questioned how I was still in a job. This made Credenza look bad, and her and her bosses, none of them tech-savvy, didn't understand what I was talking about with wrong codecs and file formats. It probably sounded like I was just trying to cover my butt after the fact. Plus, when it comes to money, the customer is always right. So it ended up becoming a sort of, let's just agree that we all made mistakes thing, but it was clear that all fingers were pointing at me. Consequently, I didn't get the pay raise I had been in line to get, meaning I couldn't move out from my parents' house, which was killing me, and was put on probation for 6 months, though I left for another job on Vulcan after 2 months. Part 3. Revenge is dish best served with béarnaise sauce and Sauvignon Blanc. About 6 Earth years later, I joined a company that sold women's boots, all shapes, colors, and sizes. They had their own IT department that produced their websites and other internal systems. Little did I know that Maleficent had also moved to this company at some point, again in the marketing department, which was downstairs from me. There was a promotional event soon where our company was giving away goodie bags with some freebies to anyone who signed up. The bags themselves were some high-quality laminated things that were being specially printed up with our company's branding, plus a QR code. The QR code would take you to a special page on our website with discounts. I met with Maleficent, who clearly didn't remember me from before, and talked about the special page I was to produce for the website. She was a pain in the butt again. She was never available. She would take an hour-and-a-half lunch every day and reclaim it on expenses. And when I did meet with her, she'd change the requirements constantly. Can you just change that bit? Never mind. Put it back. Oh, actually, could you put this crappy animation at the top of the page? No, that's a terrible idea. Why would you suggest that? Etc. Also, sitting with her, I witnessed how belittling she was to everyone in her team and would gossip about anybody if they weren't there at that moment. Obviously, all the while remembering our previous encounter where she had all but got me fired. I thought about calling her out on this, but it would have achieved nothing, and I had only just started working at this company a few weeks ago. I didn't want to make waves. So I persevered, and eventually my webpage was done, and I gave her the URL to send to the bag makers for printing the QR code. But she screwed up. I was copied into an email chain with her sending off the URL to the bag makers, and she had done it wrong. The URL was something like starting with HTTP, but she had sent it with 3 T's instead. I double-checked what I had sent her, and mine was correct. She had obviously typed it out rather than using copy-paste. We were ordering 1,000 of these bags from the printers, and they were $1 each. Then I noticed way down in the email chain, she had copied her password for the bag website. It was password. Yes, these oxygen thieves exist by the millions. I logged in with her details, from outside work with a proxy just in case, and could see she had indeed ordered 1,000 of the bags with the wrong URL for the QR code. I quickly added an extra 0 to the quantity and also pushed the requested delivery date back to a day before they were needed. I wanted to change the URL to some prawn website, but that wouldn't match what she had sent in the email, and I wanted her to be unable to escape blame. Part 4. The Aftermath. Honestly, I thought nothing would actually happen. I assumed the bag company would spot the URL mistake and just fix it. I assumed someone would notice the tenfold quantity increase and delivery date change. But as they say, when you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and umption, because none of these things happened. The bags arrived at the last minute and the URL didn't work. Maleficent stormed upstairs and asked why our team had messed up and demanding we put it right. I acted innocent, did some troubleshooting, and explained to her the URL had an extra T in it. Fine, change the URL on our website. Nope, the HTTP bit is out of our control, I'm afraid. It must be the bag company's fault. But wait, what's this? Your email to them with the wrong URL? This doesn't look good for you. Meanwhile, someone comes upstairs and asks, weren't we only getting 1,000 bags? There seems to be a lot more. Maleficent rushed downstairs to sort out this fresh hell that was rising around her as a warm glow welled up from inside me. I actually never saw her again. I had to travel to one of our other offices that afternoon, but a friend filled me in later. With not enough time to sort things out with the bag company, Maleficent had to rush around town to find a stationery store that could print 10,000 QR codes on sticky labels to stick over the wrong one on each bag. Apparently, she was there most of the night attaching them all, which was doubly funny as I'm told we didn't quite manage to give away the original 1,000 bags at the event the following day anyway, let alone the other 9,000. She was put on gardening leave and fired for gross incompetence and costing the company all the extra money. Now the marketing department is run by a guy called Theodopolopoulos. He's much nicer. Story 7. Years ago, my mother and I had just moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We had 2 dogs, one was a Bichon Shih Tzu, and the other is a Terrier Poodle mix. Because of them, we were excited for the community dog park right next to our building. Also to note, our whole building was filled with dog owners, each with dogs ranging from small to huge. Our apartment was on the first floor in the back of the building, all the way in the corner. It was a nice private area for us with how the apartments were situated. Since one of our dogs is a terrier, he can be a bit barky when we are not home. Though when we are home, we have a clicker to get his attention, which he has been trained to stop barking and come to whoever has the clicker. Due to our work hours, I was usually home in the morning and Mom was home in the afternoon, leaving him alone for a few hours during the day. After a month of moving to our new apartment, we received a note on our door. It was from one of our neighbors. It stated, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you are new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mom turned in the note right away to the leasing office as she wasn't sure what to do with it. That is when the office told us not to worry because he had done this to every dog owner in the building. They did ask us to see if we can find ways to calm him down when we were not home, so we did. We found out the kids of the neighborhood liked playing with the power station outside our apartment, and that is who he had been barking at. So we closed off that area for him when we went out and no one was home. We started playing calming music as a way to help as well. Another week goes by and this time we hear a knock at the door. We go outside and we meet our angry neighbor. He explains that our dog has kept him up every day and woke him up with his hours of barking. Both of us had been home that day, and our dog had been a good boy and had not had excessive barking. I still remember what he had told us when I explained that. "I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, then I am going to call animal control and have them both taken from you. I did it before and have no problem getting rid of your dogs too. Then I'll get you kicked out for not following your lease, and I can do that because I am very rich and the apartment needs my money. So do something to shut your dogs up or else." After that, and after my mom apologizing for what had happened, we went back in. A few moments later, I walked out to get the mail and discovered from another neighbor that he had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. After some convincing, my mom told the apartment what had happened. We were told not to worry, and if he did that again to please contact them. We also found out that the apartment had offered him an apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined since the dogs were the problem, and not him. However, after what he had done, My mom began to show signs of anxiety and bought a lemon spray bark collar for our dog. While I didn't like this idea, it had put her at ease to go outside our apartment. We did make sure to only put it on him when we both were not home. A month went by peacefully. Then once again we get a knock on our door. This time it was animal control. They had gotten an anonymous report of a dog being abused and neglected in our home. They explained that someone has said that our dogs were barking because of neglect. My mom invited the AC lady inside and explained the situation. We showed her everything we could to prevent our dogs from being taken away. The nice lady noticed how playful and happy our dogs were and figured it was another false call. She explained that they had gotten a few of those from an anonymous concerned neighbor for other apartments in this building. The AC lady left, telling us that if they threaten again to try and get it on record. This event had turned my mom into a paranoid person who became afraid to leave the house, thinking that if she did, then she would lose her pups. Normally, I am the calmest person in my family, never really letting anyone get to me, but this neighbor had did this to hurt us. So I did my research and discovered a few things that could legally help us. With new information on certain laws and leasing terms, I formed a plan. During a weekend that my mom was visiting my aunt in a different state, I began my plan. I started it by printing out a few things and then sat outside with my phone and a speaker. I began to play a video of a dog barking really loud. I had figured out which apartment was his thanks to a few neighbors who also were tired of being harassed. I sat there looking across the courtyard to where his apartment was. I waited with a huge smile on my face, and as I hoped for, he stormed out and headed over to where I was. I turned off my video and turned on my recorder without him noticing. His face is red with anger as he looks at me sitting there with a smile. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I ask him. "F you. I freaking told you what I will do to your family if you freaking didn't stop your dumb a-hole mutt from ruining my sleep. Now I'm going to get them taken from you and get you kicked out for not doing as I said. I gave you a freaking chance. I hope when they take your dogs that they are killed and you and your mom live inside a cardboard box." I give him a fake "oh dear" look and say, "So you are saying that I am not allowed to make loud noises including my dogs barking between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. and that I went against the law by doing so? You know you did. And you are telling me this from my porch at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office." "Oh no, that is a very serious threat for my dogs and my family, isn't it?" "Hell yes it is." I give him a huge smile and turned off my recorder from my phone. The neighbor is confused now and I ask him to have a seat. I have a few things to show him. I pull out my papers and hand him the first one. It was the county's noise ordinance laws. In our county, a dog's bark was considered the same amount of sound as a loud appliance, so they can bark between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could talk, I pull out another paper. This one states that it is against the leasing terms to threaten another neighbor, and after one warning, the apartment complex had the right to revoke their lease. He looks at me with an understanding of what he had done now. I silence him and pull out one last paper. This one was another leasing term I had found. This face, after reading this one, had made him turn white. This last one talked about how it was a complete violation of leasing terms to go onto another renter's property and threaten them or their property. This includes the renter's outdoor area. Those found guilty of this violation will have their lease revoked immediately and be forced to leave the apartment within a set time. The scared look on his face was priceless as I silently got up and walked back into my apartment. After he finally left, I called my leasing office and explained what had just happened and agreed to email the recording to them right away. A week later, my mom came home with some news that she had learned from the leasing office. The man had been evicted from his apartment and would be leaving later that week. I found out that my actions had caused the other dog owners of the building to come forward and admit what he had been doing to all of them. After that, there was never another complaint and I threw away the lemon spray collar. My mom still gets anxiety attacks once in a while, but has been getting help to ease those worries. As for me, I don't regret what I did. I just feel bad that it had to come to this. Hey, wait! As always, don't forget to kindly tap the like button, share, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you would have done if you were in this situation. Stay safe out there in that crazy world. Much love, peace.